Over the past month or so, the last operational Vulcan bomber has been pulling in crowds on its farewell flypasts. As this veteran of the Cold War and the Falklands campaign comes to the end of its flying life, Danny Savage tells its story as we join the Vulcan on its final flight.
A chilly October day at Robin Hood Airport near Doncaster. People have travelled from far and wide to get here. There's an air of anticipation and sadness, because today is the very last time that a Cold War relic will take to the sky over Britain. They've come to say farewell to the last flying Vulcan bomber.
It's like the Harrier, the Lightning, the Vulcan. They're iconic aircraft, you know, and the kind of aircraft that we're never going to build in this country again.
It really is an icon at the end of an era.
She's just a beautiful, unique lady, isn't she?
This should really be called the People's Aircraft. It may be painted in RAF colours, but it's owned by a charitable trust. And the real legacy can be found in the bomb bay, because here are the names of thousands of people who've paid money over the years to keep this aircraft flying. Why? Because they love it.
The equation is small amounts of money, but from loads of people, hundreds of people. And that's the way it worked. The public wants to see her fly.
Its beautiful lines have thrilled crowds at air shows for the last 8 years. It's been termed the Vulcan effect, moving grown men to tears.
One gentleman stated that he thinks he must have got some grit in his eyes because his eyes were running so much. And genuinely, I've seen that effect every year. It all means something when you stand there and you look at the crowd, and especially the children. You see this look on their face. And it's just, well, starstruck, I suppose.
And of course, there's its unique sound. The haunting howl, which can send shivers down the spine of anyone who remembers the Cold War.
Now the world's first delta-wing four-jet bomber, the Avro Vulcan.
And what an entrance it made to the aviation scene back in 1952. Just a few years after the end of the Second World War, Britain had a jet bomber which people swooned over. An early display pilot was told off for rolling a Vulcan because it was behaviour unbecoming of a bomber, although the crowd loved it. Undeterred by such a ticking off, another test pilot pulled a full loop at a later air show.
Now you must turn at once to Tony Blackman. There he goes. He's now on the top of the loop. He's over the top and he's rolling out.
What happened at Farnborough was...
Speaking to us from Australia is that same test pilot. Tony Blackman remembers that week well. He even took passengers.
To my surprise, our press officer said a lot of the secretaries wanted to fly in the back during the show. And so, well, I agreed, all right, I'll agree to train one every day and they can fly in the back. And my wife came down on the weekend and said, hey, what's going on? I better have a go at this in the back as well.
Tony went on to spend his career flying the bomber, which handled like a fighter. He even delivered Vulcan 558 to RAF Waddington, straight from the factory.
Amazing how well the team have managed to keep it serviceable all this time. But it relied on the support, obviously, of the engine and the airframe manufacturers, and it just has to come to the end. Air displays after this will seem very dull.
Attention, attention. This is the bomber controller.
The operational role of the Vulcan in its heyday, though, is sobering.
The bomb bays of the B-Force received their thermonuclear cargo.
In the age of mutual assured destruction, its crews would have been tasked to kill millions of people with nuclear bombs.
The one bomb that we had in our aircraft was roughly equivalent to all the bombs that we dropped on Germany in World War II. All of them.
Peter West was on duty in November 1962 when we stood on the brink of World War III.
So missiles of 1,500 miles range and more were pointing at American cities.
The catalyst was the Cuban Missile Crisis. With the prospect of Russian nuclear missiles being delivered by boat to Cuba, just 90 miles from the US mainland, the Americans and Russians squared up to each other at sea. The message from America was back off or else.
And so close is Cuba to the States that the warning system would be useless.
As the standoff continued, the Vulcan bombers sat at airfields with their nuclear payloads, ready to go at a few minutes' notice.
We were not going to come back. Any of us that might have got back would have been shot down by our own side, because they're going to see these things coming from the east and they're not going to bother about whether they're Soviet or what. We had no illusions about that. This was definitely going to be a one-way mission.
Mercifully, Peter and his V-bomber colleagues never had to use the H-bomb. But the Vulcan did go to war in the Falklands campaign in 1982. It was the plane's most famous mission and was called Operation Black Buck.
Black Buck was a mission to get a bomb on the runway at Stanley. Admiral Woodward reckoned his first task was to put that airfield out of business, which was precisely what we did.
Martin Withers was the pilot. It was an extraordinary feat, a round trip of nearly 8,000 miles over featureless sea from Ascension Island. The Vulcan had to be repeatedly refueled in mid-air and was running on vapours as it desperately searched for its last tanker on the way back.
And there he was, with his hose streamed out of the back on a lovely blue sky, first refuelling we'd done in the daylight, and it was, the most beautiful sight in the world.
It was a triumph for the old V-Force aircraft. But such a sortie only prolonged the life of the Vulcans for a few more years. XH558 was officially retired from service in 1993 and taken to Bruntingthorpe in Leicestershire. The Vulcan to the Sky Trust got hold of it a few years later and brought her back to life. 10 years of work and millions of pounds, including a lottery grant later, she flew again in 2007.
So this is the cockpit of Vulcan XH558. It's fairly small and the view isn't fantastic. Martin, just give us a quick whip round and tell us roughly what we're looking at.
Right, what you've got here is the original in-service part of the aircraft. You've got the engine instruments. As you move the throttles, obviously expect the RPM to increase. This one will wind up and away we go.
The nuclear bomb even influenced the look of the Vulcan.
Rather limited visibility because the aircraft was designed to fly at high level, to be a bomber from high level, and so lookout wasn't that important. And also it was important that in the nuclear strike role that we were able to cover all these windows, both the windscreens and the side windows, to black the whole thing out so that we didn't get affected by the flash.
It's estimated that 20 million people have seen her, but with the expert help to keep her flying safely no longer available, her time in the sky has come to an end.
She is the last all-British four-engine jet aircraft flying in the world. And when we stop flying, it's the end of a major chapter. And I think that's what people react to. They look at an achievement from an era when we led the world, and there's some nostalgia there. I know people will be very sad that it stopped flying, but the aircraft will be retained in running order. We will start her up, we will taxi her, and she is destined to be the centrepiece of a new activity to inspire the young.
And so this plane will never fly again, but it's had such an extraordinary effect on so many people. This plane may be gone from our skies forever, but for anybody who saw it, they'll remember it for the rest of their lives.
It is like a funeral almost, this. You know, we're now going to have a little bit of a wake because she won't be flying anymore. Maybe make me cry now.